This is Dateline, News and Conversation. My guest tonight, he's back, Stas Kraprivnik. Stas, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Always a pleasure.
It's always my pleasure. Listen, I know you're short on time tonight. Let's get right to it. The downing of the Russian airplane IL-76. So much in the news, speculation, who did it, why did it happen, etc. I just want to ask you to start out, what's your opinion on what happened?
Well, number one, there's no speculation on who did it. There may be a speculation on what missile was used, whether it was Idris or a Patriot. Both have the range between, they hide these anti-aircraft missile systems in cities. I mean, literally in cities, not on city roofs or something like that. In Moscow, there are Panzer systems on city roofs of certain buildings, key buildings. But the Ukrainians hide them in courtyards. That way, if they get hit, they're using their own citizens' human shields. Then they can blame Russia for everything. And then when they fire it, the missiles also have a tendency of falling right back down on the city. But I digress. I'm sorry about that. This case, the Patriots got 140 kilometer, 160 kilometer range. The Idris has a 120 kilometer range. So it's 80 kilometers from Belgorod to Kharkiv, city center, maybe a little bit more for the airport. And their airports are usually further out from the cities. So easily they can cover that. Now, having said that, they knew who was flying. They were informed that there were POWs coming in. The Ukrainian army never said anything after that missile was fired. They still haven't made any comments. All the propagandists were screaming with joy. We took down a transport plane that was carrying S-3 or S-400 missiles. And then the issues started coming out. Now I got to see videos from the first reporter that was on the ground. These weren't published videos. I was on RT yesterday, English edition, and they had a guy who happened to be in Belgrade. It was 30 minutes away from it when it happened. He ran in. They let him in. He was the first press on site. Well, there's not much left of this plane because apparently had pretty full fuel tanks. So there's chunks of metal, a few bodies, and they're not even full bodies. All the other bodies just disintegrated from the explosion, and the field is covered in red spray, blood. So just everywhere's blood that's sprayed out. Body parts, not really. A few. So that's what it is. So what came out was then that there were 65 POWs or 6 crew, 65 POWs, and 3 guards that were with them. Then there was another plane flying in behind them that turned around. That had 80 more POWs on it. But what came out later was apparently who also was supposed to be on this plane, but were not on this plane. So the main negotiators, which is a member of parliament, Samshaul Saraliev, and General Sergei Yegorev, were both supposed to be on that plane. For whatever reason, they weren't. So I would count this as an assassination attempt. And I would put this in the same straits as the Israeli tactic. The Israelis under Netanyahu's Nazi regime were holding negotiations with Hamas. 1 second, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, they were holding negotiations with Hamas to release hostages, and then the negotiations ended. And the way the Israelis ended the negotiations is they killed the main negotiator, who for Hamas happened to be living in Lebanon. So they sent a missile into his house, took him and his family out. And the negotiations. Don't have to worry about this anymore. See, the Palestinians don't want to negotiate. So I see this as basically the same thing. So this was an assassination attempt by a terrorist regime that's proven over and over that is nothing more than a terrorist regime trained, equipped by the CIA and MI6, backed by the CIA and MI6, just like IGIL was trained and equipped by the Anglo sphere and backed by the Anglo sphere. So when Trump says, we killed ISIS, no, well, yeah, you killed ISIS. Not, we just won't count the 50,000 ISIS troops killed by Russia. Okay, whatever. But the same thing here. So you got a Nazi terrorist regime that's only going to go further into terrorist strikes and terrorist actions because they're massively losing on the battlefield. I mean, they are getting destroyed on the battlefield, and the mass mobilization, basically, of anything that moves that can carry a weapon, it's not going to solve it because the quality of the troops and the morale of the troops will only continue to decline.
Okay, I've got to ask you a couple of questions. Why on earth would Kiev order such a strike? I mean, many of us know that everything that comes out of Kiev is a lie. Everything that comes out of Washington is a lie. Why would they do? I'm sure they blamed it on Russia. I've already read that. But why would they do that?
Well, the thing is, the West is pushing Kiev to negotiate. Of course, we're not going to negotiate with this present regime. I mean, that's a dead end. And they're starting to figure out that Russia isn't going to negotiate. It's ready to negotiate, but not with these bastards. All of them deserve a tribunal and a noose. So at this point, the MI6 has gotten a lot more involved. They've got Bogdanov as head of the military. Now, Bogdanov, for those who don't know it, was head of the security services, which is the main terrorist organization in Ukraine. They've been committing all these terrorist acts, assassinations, and so on. So Zaluzhny has been removed. The Zaluzhny hasn't given up power. So there's going to be an interesting showdown coming down for that. And Bogdanov is now officially head of the military. So he's gotten a lot more potential and assets. And he's got to do something to end these negotiations, any kind of negotiation. So assassinate the parlayers. The other thing is too, they make moves toward repatriation. You got to understand, there are about 80,000 plus POWs in Russia. The Ukrainians just in September, when the radio station Volga went live, and an app, by the way, to download on your phone. And through that app and through that radio station, you can arrange to surrender and live and get to live. Just in September, 10,000 Ukrainians surrendered. And it's only going to grow because the motivation for these guys is dropping like a rock. Even amongst the experienced troops is dropping like a rock. Now you're throwing in a bunch of guys that have been literally press ganged off of the streets, off of buses, off of anywhere that they're having to be. And are pushed in, no matter what their medical, psychological, or physical profiles are. There are guys without fingers, without feet. They're being pushed in. So it is what it is from that side. And Washington couldn't give a bigger damn, and neither could London, to the last Ukrainian. So now this guy's in power effectively for the WWIII, and he's got to break this off because when the POWs get returned, what are they? In order to keep them from surrendering, they're being told constantly, if you surrender to the Russians, they're orcs, they're going to kill you, they're going to torture you, they're going to humiliate you, they're going to beat you, they're going to make a slave out of you, whatever they can come up with. And what these guys come back with is, well, no, we got fed, we got clothed, we got medical care, and we got warm places to sleep. And there's quite a few of them that have now submitted and have been submitting for Russian citizenship while in POW camps. I mean, that tells you a lot right there. You didn't see Germans submitting for Soviet citizenship, and you didn't see Soviets submitting for Nazi citizenship, or Americans submitting for German citizenship sitting in POW camps. But you've got that. So that's just another thing. So if these guys come back, what are they going to tell everybody? Because they're going to get recycled right back into the front instant. Unless they're invalids, unless they're sending back invalids that can't fight, everybody's going to get recycled back into front line. And they're not going to get choice.
Who gave the order? Did Zelensky? Did somebody from the SBU? give the order? Did Zelensky give the order? I mean, what the heck is going on over there?
Zelensky probably didn't give the order. Not that I'm defending the guy or anything. It may have come from. I doubt it came from Zelensky himself. It probably came from Yermak, who's his head of chief of staff, and basically the guy that makes most of the decisions. While the boss is snorting coke or dropping whatever he's dropping, or whatever pills he's using. Or may have just come off straight from Bogdanov. It's hard to tell, and we'll never know because doubtfully it was ever recorded on paper. It's probably a verbal order. Unless somebody who had a tape recorder or a phone recorder going, we'll never know. But it's understandable where it came from, especially for something like this, because this wasn't a defensive missile launched. This was an offensive missile launch to take out a plane that was way out of their zone of immediate operation. So this is basically a missile ambush. And they knew it was coming. So, they knew exactly when it was supposed to be landing, or more or less exactly when it was supposed to be landing. So there's going to be no big guesswork. You don't have to have a crew in there trying to figure out where the plane is. The radar system on a Patriot will pick up 160 kilometers away easily. It'll pick up targets moving.
Okay. I have another big question. Ukraine has committed a lot of attacks on Russian territory. They've attacked the bridge at Kerch twice, disabled it for a period of time. It's all repaired now. They attacked a ship in Sevastopol. Supposedly, and the Moskva, I think that was the name of their command ship, the Russian Navy command ship. That was over a year ago. They've attacked Belgorod a number of times, killing civilians. They've attacked Donetsk repeatedly, killing over 14,000 people now in 10 years. People are saying Russia has exercised extraordinary patience. Here's my thought, and I'd like your comment on it. I think that Putin and his circle are not going to be provoked into an attack on Germany, Great Britain, or the United States, where these missiles are coming from. I think that's what they want. That's what the United States and NATO probably want, is for Russia to overattack. On the other hand, why do you suppose, if you agree, that Russia has not been provoked and continues with what seems to be its very deliberate operation to achieve the three main goals that Putin set out 2 years ago at the beginning of the SMO? What are your thoughts?
Begin with the Moskva, which was the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet. That wasn't a terrorist attack. As much as that was a painful loss, that was a legitimate military target. Now everything else, they did take out do a drone attack and hit a transport ship, a civilian transport ship in harbor. It was I can't remember whose flag it was under, but either way, yeah, they've done plenty of actual terrorist attacks, and they've been doing it for 10 years. And before we go on, since we're heading to the 2-year anniversary, when they say Russia invaded, let's go back a little bit in history and look at what was happening right before everything started. Now, Ukraine amassed over 200,000 troops on the Russian and the Donbass borders. Now, that's not a defensive army. They started artillery shelling, massive artillery shelling. I mean, the upscale was several 100%. that's when Russia declared that it accepted the independence of LNR and DNR. Recognized. I'm sorry, that's the word. Recognized their independence. Well, Ukraine then launched. There were several landing bases created across the bordering rivers. So this is understandable. This is going to be the Plattsdarm that was going to serve for the invasion. And there were two very large special operations groups that moved into Russia itself and were destroyed inside of Russia. They were meant to do diversionary and sabotage operations. So, I mean, it was obvious that within a day or 2 days, the Ukrainians are launching an offensive. And considering the front line in Donetsk literally ran at the edge of Donetsk, part of Donetsk was actually in the hands of the Ukrainians. I mean, we would have been talking about not a couple dozens of people killed from a missile strike like in the market last Sunday, but you would have been looking at hundreds, if not thousands, killed every single day by mass artillery strikes. So at this point, the Russian attack was preventive to save lives. Didn't save the Ukrainian lives, the soldiers, and they didn't deserve to have them saved, considering what they were getting ready to do. But considering all of that, the West turned everything around as usual, anyways. So historical facts of the West are anthem, and have always been that way. But that's just a little bit on the historical side. Russia, from day one, was trying to negotiate this to an end. By March, now the fighting started the 23rd of February. By March of that month, within 3 weeks, they were working out an agreement. An agreement which, by the way, would have had the Russian military leave all of Ukraine, except Crimea, which never was under any kind of negotiation. And they were actually willing to have another referendum, a full referendum with international observers in LNR and DNR, and determine where the people actually wanted. And maybe still somehow put them into autonomous regions. And then, as we all know, as been admitted by members of the Ukrainian government, Boris Johnson, at the behest of the vegetable in Washington, or otherwise known as the collective Biden, flew in and torpedoed those negotiations. Told Zelensky, "We'll give you everything you need. You will win this war. The Russians are weak. They can't do anything. Fight, and we'll give you everything." Well, 600 to 650,000 dead Ukrainian soldiers, at least 50,000 amputees, about a million wounded at one level or another. Out of a population of 42 million, well, okay, so a bit less than that, because they still counted the LNR, DNR, and Crimea as part of their population. So let's say out of a population about 34 million, about 13 million have left, plus as of now, Zaporozhye and Kherson are part of Russia, and there will be more parts that will become part of Russia. So that's what happens when you listen to the English or the American government and their guarantees. National suicide.
I know that you're under a time constraint here. I asked you if part of Russia's strategy was not to be provoked with a major attack on Germany, on Brussels, on the UK, or even on America. If we look at a different level, and I try to keep this in mind all the time, Russia has said it's moved east and away from the West, the United States. Russia has been working very quickly with China and India and other countries to de-dollarize, to use their own currencies. This, to me, is an economic war that's being fought in parallel with what's going on the battlefield. So if that's what Russia's plan is, why would they try to begin what would essentially be World War III, a nuclear confrontation with all of the West and the United States. Your thoughts?
Well, you're right. When dealing with the West, in this case, the longer this drags out, the more Europe collapses, and it's collapsing in front of us. Russia had originally hoped that they would be able to negotiate. You know, when Merkel and then Hollande, back about a year and a half ago now, both came out, first Merkel and then a couple days later Hollande, both came out to journalists without any prompt. Well, maybe they had prompting in the background, who knows? And were bragging about how they duped Putin and Minsk I and Minsk II. They never wanted. They were never negotiating for peace. They were just negotiating for time to prepare the Ukrainian army for war with Russia, not with Donbass, with Russia. So it comes as an understanding that there's nobody in the West you can negotiate with. Okay, you want a war of attrition? Let's have an economic war of attrition. And the West is buckling. America, not so much so, but Europe is. And Europe is already basically a second world continent and falling fast. Germany's manufacturing base is now at the same up level that it was in 2010. They basically erased a decade. And it's collapsing, continuing. And that's one of the best ones. A lot of the European countries, if you look at their manufacturing bases, they've gone down to volumes from the 90s, and it's only going to go down further. So yeah, there's no reason for Russia to want this war. Now, the problem is the West wants this war, the Western elites. They really, really want this war. They've convinced themselves there's no threat of nuclear war, and they're going to have a conventional war, a good old conventional war. Well, there's and I think they're going to get it. Unfortunately, I think there's very little sanity left in the vast majority of these elites. I mean, if you ever watch Davis, what they talk about, that understandable. They're in their own little reality echo chamber that has nothing to do with the average human being on this planet. And the problem too is, if you look at more than half of humanity is going to go to the polls this year. Oh, by the way, Ukraine isn't, because they're not going to have elections, because that's what democracies are. As you know, the West and Blinken and all of them tell us that they're defending Western values by killing off political opposition, nationalizing all the media, banning elections, things like that. Which, by the way, unfortunately, are what Western values are becoming. And then you've got problems like in Germany, where you have this upstart party that appeared 8 years ago, called the Alternative Future for Germany. And they're now the second party in Germany and are on cue to become the primary party of Germany. Now, the German government, the German elites have tried in various ways to defame them, have tried in various ways to get them banned, but they can't, or they haven't been able to anyways. The best way to, and they're looking at losing power to these guys. And these guys are conservatives. They're basically paleo conservatives. The problem, and that's a big problem, but the best way to keep power is, unfortunately, in these cases, go to war. And then you get to shut up all of in the name of democracy, you'll get to shut up and maybe even kill off quite a few of your political opponents, or just send them to the front, or hang them as traitors. People get creative. And you're looking at the same effect throughout most of Western Europe. So war really is for them a way out, at least to stay in power for however longer. Unfortunately. Now, in February 24, you got Steadfast Defender 24, which is a yearly military exercise of NATO. This is going to be the biggest one since the end of the Cold War. The biggest one had 120,000 troops in it, and that was the height of the Cold War. This one's going to have 90,000 troops right on the Ukrainian border, the Polish-Ukrainian border. The U.S. is moving troops from the mainland, so these aren't going to be even the 82nd Airborne. They're already there, or the 101st Airborne that are both in Romania and have appeared in Moldova, to the surprise of the Moldovans. There are going to be more troops moved in. The British have said they're going to be sending more troops than they've ever sent to any exercise. So you're going to have an operational group of 90,000 troops on the Polish-Ukrainian border to go into Western Ukraine. plus 200,000 Polish troops from Poland itself, from the Baltic states, another about 15,000 troops from all three of them combined. 5,000 Germans additionally in the Baltics, plus additional American troops in the Baltic. You're looking at a combat group just in those areas, plus Romania, of somewhere around close to 500,000 up and down the Russian border and the Polish-Ukrainian border. And now the Asian Times, with sources from the Pentagon, have said that they're looking that Ukraine will more likely move its capital from Kiev to Lvov in the west, right around the border. They're not far from the Polish border. So the chances of getting that big war that they really, really want, but Donov's primary objective, just like Zelensky's, is to make the big war, is to get everybody involved. Because they can't win, no matter how much they get, they're not going to be able to win. But if you get everybody in, maybe we can get to stay in power and continue stealing and murdering to our heart's content.
I keep going back to this because I've been following these annual military exercises, which are actually gaming first strike attack on Russia.
Yep.
And I keep trying to tell people, put yourself in Putin's shoes or the Kremlin or the Russian military. When they see this year after year, all along their border, in the Arctic, in the Black Sea, what are you thinking? I mean, now it's a matter of just a few minutes for multiple strikes all over Russia. And their plan is, well, if we hit them first, hit them hard enough, they won't be able to retaliate. This to me is complete insanity. It's the most incredible provocation you could do to another sovereign country. And yet Russia exercises patience, is looking to accomplish its goals on its own time, and yet they've got all of this on the border. Your thoughts?
Well, Russia, and this was developed first under the Soviet Union. It's still functional. It's been upgraded. It has what's called a dead hand. There's a computerized system in a secret base that has sensors in all the major Russian cities. If it detects high heat spikes, earthquake spikes, radiation spikes, i.e. a nuclear strike on a city, and even one city, within 15 minutes, if it doesn't get a human stand-down order, the system launches one ballistic missile. The missile flies the entire length of Russia, disseminating strike codes to every single unit, every single fire base, every single mobile nuclear platform, and there's tons of them out on the wheeled, on trains, and on rivers, and to the submarine fleets to strike. Launch everything you have. It's the dead hand. You can take out Moscow, you can take out St. Petersburg, and you're still going to get 1,000 missiles flying back at you. Because you can't but between 300 or 400 missiles you can't find physically. Nobody can find them. They're out somewhere in Siberia, they're out somewhere in the Urals, they're on some rivers, or they're in submarines. Plus, somewhere off the coast of the U.S. on both sides are the Poseidon missiles. And there are more Poseidon missiles that can be launched. Well, they're not missiles, they're torpedoes. They're carrying 100 megaton warhead. Let me explain what that means for the people who don't understand what happens when 100 megaton, when a 50 megaton warhead explodes underwater. You're going to get a wave of about between 300 and 500 meters high coming in, wiping out everything within the seacoast, Washington, New York, Richmond, everything within the flood range, probably at least 20, 30 kilometers in. When a wave that big with that much force comes in. So plus radioactive fallout from the water itself. Not a pretty picture. It's one of those, yeah, you got us, and welcome to hell too. We'll take you down with us. So the people in Washington are quite literally satanic. I don't know. I can't even call them insane anymore. I think they really are satanic. They want human. I don't know if I think they really want human civilization to end. They're going to climb out of their bunkers if they ever get to them, and they're going to start a new wonderful utopia. Well, at least in their minds. So I don't know how else to repeat it. I used to believe that okay, maybe they're mal-informed, maybe they're a little crazy, or a few people crazy. Now I just look at it as pure Satanism. I mean, everything is going in Western society, and looking at the way the leadership and these people function, other than satanic, I don't know how else to describe it.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I have labeled it the same thing. I think it's evil, it's satanic. But when you look at everything else that I don't even want to call them global elites, but they're these global forces, they have been destroying in every way they can Western culture, American culture. They have, we can call it nihilism, you can call it liberalism, injecting all of these liberal ideas into society, which breaks up the family, which breaks up the country, turns everybody against each other, makes everybody addicted to drugs or entertainment. So these creatures are attacking what I would like to call is our basic human nature. I think it's an all-out plan to eliminate and destroy what's left of us. Your concluding thoughts?
Satan is the great liberator. He is. Satan, what has Satan always told humanity? If we're going to go in theology here, what has Satan always told humanity? You're an animal. You do whatever you want. Whatever feels good to you, do it. Do it to your neighbor. Of course, if your neighbor's bigger than you and he wants to do something to you, well, that's just part of the deal. Live like an animal. You're free. Do everything. God is not a liberator. God is an authoritarian. He tells humanity, you're not animals. You're better than animals. Here's the rules you will live under. You don't live under them. You don't have to live under them, but there's going to be a price at the end for not living under them. In the West, there's a lot of Satanism. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, it's so blatantly obvious. You don't have to even, back in the 60s, 70s, people, if you listen to records backwards, you hear a message or something like that. And maybe some did, maybe some didn't. A lot of it was maybe a lot of people's heads. I watched some of those videos. Some of them were really stretching. These days, I mean, come on. You got satanic rituals everywhere on the Emmys. In Davis, they had a witch doctor was concluding a ceremony, calling in spirits, and so on and so on. I mean, it is so obvious. Now, having said that, in Christianity, in Judaism, in Islam, so your three basic Abrahamic religions that, by the way, encompass more than half of humanity. Well, Christianity and Islam encompass more than half of humanity. Judaism is pretty small, relatively. But between them and all of them, suicide is the ultimate sin. It's sin against God, because you're saying to God, "Go screw yourself. I will end my life the way I want to end my life. You have no say in this." It's a sin that can't be repented because you're dead. Now, having said that, if you look at what's being pushed in the West, euthanasia, pedophilia, and euthanasia. In Netherlands, they've got suicide capsules, which, by the way, are also in Canada. I was listening to a news article. They're saying something like 1 in 10 deaths in Canada is now suicide, and the government assists. They're more than happy to assist. Then a Paralympic, a woman, so she's paralyzed from the waist down. She was a Paralympian in Canada, and she wrote to a government program that was supposed to build her a ramp to her front door for free, part of the government program. And what she was talking about this in the news article, what you got back was a letter saying, "Wouldn't you be better off dead? Let us help you. And in Canada now, it's a way to get out of poverty too. If you're really poor and you can't afford a quality life, let's help you with that. Not lift you up and get you a job or re-educate you, but let's get you dead. It'll be better that way. So you're looking at these elites that they're pushing their own population into a mass sacrifice, satanic sacrifice, suicide. In the Netherlands, they're pushing for euthanasia. You can get euthanasia for being depressed. They had a 17-year-old commit suicide, which was legal. Now they're trying to push it down to 12-year-olds. I mean, 17-year-olds for depression. We normally treat depression. People come out of depression. They live their lives. But hey, why bother with that? You can just die now. It'll be better. So now you're going to allow 12-year-olds without parental consent. What parent in their right mind is going to give that kind of consent? They'll just go and commit suicide, and you got no say in it, parent. And this is all in the name of what exactly? What human rights is that in the name of? It's a mass sacrifice to the devil of your own population, and they're pushing it hard. And if they, if we just would stay in the West, that'd be one thing. But they're not going to stay in the West. They're trying to export it to the rest of the world and the rest of humanity.
Well, you talked about what we're talking about here is depopulation, assisted suicide,
Yeah.
suicide pills, whatever it is. Everything else they're doing to dehumanize us is basically a depopulation agenda.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. These people at Davos and Klaus Schwab and all of his cronies are saying, we're useless. All we're doing is eating and consuming, and we don't contribute to them and to their wealth and everything else. So let's get rid of them. And when you look at what's happening in the world today, if you can really look at all of it, the wars, the conflict, the destruction of Western culture and society, Western religions, this thing all really makes a whole lot of sense. It is not human nature to do this to itself, to commit suicide. It is something other. And I would agree with you that I do believe that it is satanic. Stas, I want to thank you so much. I know you're very busy. You're in great demand all over. I want to thank you for the time that you've always offered to me. We'll look forward to staying in touch and continuing the conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. That's even a bigger thank you.